Good morning. I guess I sort of feel a little bit like the sort of Academy Awards in that I'm here to pick up something on behalf of someone who can't be with us. Unfortunately, the difference is there's no award. But there we go. I'm here, but also there's a good opportunity, I think, as well, in that I'm the comms director at BDO, and actually it's a good opportunity for me to reinforce the importance of communications around organisational change. It's very interesting in terms of what Keith talked about in terms of reputation as well, both external and also internal reputation. So very happy to go down the route of communications as well in terms of what we're going to talk about. I think the third thing I just wanted to say was that, again, Keith talked very much about the future. I'm very much coming at it from a position of the here and now, in that we've gone through a particular change over the last 6 to 9 months. Which has taken us from a strategic perspective in terms of what we want our organisation to look like in the future, but has taken us down to the nitty-gritty of things like pedestals, and those sorts of things about the day-to-day office environment, which for me has been fascinating because, as I say, it's both at that level, but actually about making it work. So, if I just give you the context, and then we've got a sort of 10-minute video which shows a good cross-section of people within BDO in terms of how we manage the process, what the reaction has been, and actually Mark, as Karen mentioned, Mark is featured in the video as our Chief Operating Officer, who really, I suppose, was the sort of classic overall sponsor of the exercise. So that's what we're going to sort of go through, what we'll talk about. Just a bit of context. For those of you who don't know BDO, we are an accountancy and business advisory organisation. We are actually a global network of firms. So I think we're in around 140 countries. We turn over $6 billion, and we have around 55,000 people. So we are actually a pretty significant organisation. I think in the UK, we tend to be seen as sort of 1 or 2 down from the big 4. Of which obviously PwC is sort of up there as a sort of 1 or 2. In the UK, we have 23 offices, we have around 3,500 people. And if I sort of take it down still further to make it as relevant as possible to what we'll talk about, is that we have our sort of UK head office in Baker Street, 55 Baker Street. And for those of you with longer memories, I don't expect you to think, oh yes, 55 Baker Street. It basically was the old headquarters of M&S before they moved over to Paddington Basin. So that's a bit of sort of overall context about the organisation, and I'm going to focus on 55 Baker Street. Because the challenge there over the last, as I say, 6 to 9 months was, which I have to say, it's early days, but we have achieved it, was to take around 800 people in the building already, move another 400 people into that building, introduce what we call new ways of working, and at the same time increase the amount of space that we were able to sublet. So quite a nice sort of conundrum there to tackle. And there are a number of catalysts to actually get us on that road. If I go back a year, over a year now, I think, although we didn't realise it at the time, the whole planning around Olympics was actually one particular trigger, because it made us look at the way people worked, how we were going to manage the sort of prophets of doom, about what was going to happen, and London would come to a complete and utter standstill. And so, whilst we were not immune to looking clearly at the way our people were working already, given the type of work we were in and the type of clients that we serve, the Olympics provided a sort of focus. And we did a lot of work around Olympics, a lot of work about work patterns, people's preferences for work. And I suppose that thinking, once the Olympics were over, that thinking continued. So that was the first point. The second point, perhaps the biggest catalyst, was a merger. So in April, 1st of April, end of March, we formally completed our merger with a sort of companion sister advisory firm, an accountancy called PKF. PKF are around a third of the size of BDO, so we were around just over 2,000, went to 3,500 people. Now with revenues sort of approaching around 400 million. And that merger, notwithstanding a whole range of activities around the merger, culture again raised as an issue, culture very, very important, and from a communications perspective, very, very important as well. And so you have the whole cultural elements, but you also do have some of those sort of practicalities as well. And we ended up, I think, with 6 offices which we wanted to co-locate. So in the main centres, so like Bristol, Manchester, Leeds. We both had offices. It wasn't about redundancies or anything like that. It was about simply looking at the estate, looking at how it's being used, and sort of essentially plugging people together. In London, that comes back to Baker Street. So PKF were based in Farringdon. We also had 50 people in Hatfield, and so that, if my arithmetic is correct, hopefully working for an accountancy firm, that was my 800, plus 350 from Farringdon, plus 50 from Hatfield. And within a 12-week period, our objective was to move everyone into Baker Street, to move those 400 into Baker Street, to become a much more connected organisation, to adopt, as I say, what we were calling new ways of working, and secure productivity improvements at the same time. So that's the context. I think the best thing to do now is for us to show the video. Or do you want me to carry on talking?
Yes, please.
Or do a dance maybe? Or
What was your best toilet?
As you have noticed.
I'm afraid any jokes I know are not really suitable for a 10 past 10 in the morning, so I'll carry on actually, I can carry on, in terms of just a few of the things that we talked about. Yeah, I mean, the other point was actually when you see the video, you know, about our current environment, we did have excess capacity, so I'm not trying to overclaim by saying that we actually got 400 people in and that had increased our subletting. We didn't use our space very, very well. But of course that partly misses the point, isn't it? Because one of the key concerns of people in this type of environment is we're all going to be crammed together. You know, it just means that our desks are going to be reduced. It's just going to be some sort of like some you know, rabbit hutches and a very, very uneasy working environment. So there were clearly a lot of myths that were done, a lot of myths that were no, it's there were a lot of myths. I think there's another important point to make. So as you'll see from the video, staff restaurant was going to close to get everyone in. You know, you wouldn't have a desk. You know, you'd be fighting for desks. All those sorts of maybe very obvious things. So from a comms perspective, it was very important early on that we try to address those myths. And actually, again, as we'll see in the video, it was almost quite advantageous for these myths to spring up, because actually that's what they were myths. And so when we actually said, actually, no, we're not going to close the restaurant. No, it's not as bad as that. Actually, people were like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe I can give this a go. So, so the myth busting was quite important. Are we ready?
I like your style.
Yeah.
Good intro.
Okay.
I'm Mark Sheffield, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for BDO. We'd recognised over a period of time that our occupation of our buildings had become increasingly inefficient. I think everybody had suffered recessionary impacts and lower headcounts. So there was an increasing need to look at how we occupied the building. Technology over the last few years has become a huge enabler. So we've worked with laptops, obviously, for the last 10 plus years. But it's what you can do in terms of the connectivity of those laptops now that has really changed the way that we can work, and the new applications such as Link Video Share, Link Instant Messaging, the ability to collaborate without physically having to be in the same location means you can just do more from different places, and that absolutely underpins and enables more flexible working.
We had implemented a corporate Wi-Fi solution which was going to be very secure, resilient, and enable people to be very flexible in their working space, specifically within the London office itself. And as we move forward, really enhancing and moving that service out to all of our new regional offices.
Link is brilliant. I use it regularly, and it's a very useful tool to work through with people who aren't sat in your office. And certainly the Wi-Fi throughout the building has helped as well. So you can go to a meeting, you don't have to worry about plugging in, plugging out again, losing data you might have saved. So the mobile aspects have been really important.
So the first step was to work out the art of the possible. So what is it that we could actually fit into the building that would work effectively and efficiently? And whilst we've got lots of expertise in our organisation, that particular area isn't one where we are proficient. So we engaged Advanced Workplace Associates who came in and helped us work out just what the change would look and feel like, and applying it to the logistics of what we had available, what we could really expect to achieve. Once we'd got that as a headline, we then had an outline business case, and that we could then start to engage our leaders with and start to take them on the journey. We started actually with a pilot in Bristol just over 2 years ago. So in that instance, we went completely free desking, partners down to new graduate joiners. We adopted hot boxes, clear desk, lockers for everybody. No assigned seating at all. And we found that it worked pretty well, but it was in a very small environment, 80, 90 people. But we saw the flexibility that that could start to put within the organisation, and the efficiency with which you could then occupy smaller amounts of real estate. So we did start with the leadership team, because unless you've got backing from the top, then it's going to fall over very quickly. So there has to be an absolute unequivocal commitment that we're going to drive the change. One of the critical things was showing those leaders how involved they would be in the making of the decisions as to what the eventual solution would look like. So yes, we ran the spreadsheets, we did the desk utilisation, we did the meeting room analysis, but we then made that absolutely transparent to our business unit leaders around the data that was produced from those feasibility studies. And that helped them buy in to the art of the possible and what we could really achieve in a sensible manner without overstressing it. But yes, they're auditors and they're forensic people, and they wanted to audit the results. One of the best things we did was to deploy the role of champion. So this was a non-partner within the business. This was a real person who understood exactly how the different streams worked, because it was them working in their environment.
So my role as a champion was to act as an interface between the leadership team, who were responsible for the project, and for my local team.
My role was to be an ambassador to the team, so to take the ideas that were discussed in the central meetings, to go out to my team, talk about them, say, ask what they liked, ask what they didn't like about it, take those ideas back to the central team and use them to form the plan for going forwards.
They were absolutely instrumental in conveying the message, in dispelling the fear, and indeed designing the solution, because they were at the coalface. They knew how it would or wouldn't work.
The first reactions to new ways of working was one, recognising that we needed to change a bit. The way we were working presently was probably quite inefficient, and at the same time make sure that people felt that they weren't being disadvantaged and still relatively comfortable.
People's space in the office is very personal, and the changes to new ways of working, it's all about the people. So reluctant to, am I going to lose my desk? What about the photo that's on my desk? What about my personal possessions? I like having my files next to me.
And it was amazing that one of the major issues seemed to be to do with the staff canteen. And I think it was one of those things that people saw as their one time in the day when they could all get together. And the idea initially that this was going to be closed completely was a bit of a major thing.
The initial feedback when we were talking about launching new ways of working was one of absolute fear and rejection. A normal reaction to potential change. Looking back on it, it actually wasn't unhelpful for some of those more fearful rumours and myths to perpetuate, because it meant that when we could actually talk about the plans that we had, we could dispel a lot of those and show people that actually the change was not going to be as radical as perhaps they thought.
Some of the challenges we've had is ensuring that we've got the right technology partners to work with and having the faith in their ability to deliver, to ensure that we can go back to the business and guarantee delivery of, in alignment with their objectives.
The transition for us actually has gone very smoothly, and I think much more smoothly than the cynics had feared. It hasn't been a great upheaval. I think people generally have embraced it, and once they understood the business needs, I think it was easier for them to understand. There are some teething issues, but I think people, we can get round those easy enough. None of these things are particularly difficult.
We haven't had I haven't really seen any sign of being cramped, which was one of my concerns.
In terms of less obvious benefits for agile working, I think definitely the fact that I have different people sitting around me. So although we have some core desks, we have some flexible space too.
The format, reworking the format of the cafe has given us a lot more space for meeting rooms, and the space that's down there is better utilised now. We didn't need walkways, which are now benches where staff can actually sit and chat.
I think the advice that I would give to anybody in a similar position to me thinking about doing this in the future would be firstly to understand what it is you want to achieve and why. Be really clear on that up front. Don't go anywhere unless you've got the absolute backing of your senior leadership team. Recognise that it's going to take probably twice or three times as long as you initially think to actually succeed and embed the change. And throughout the journey, engage your people. Let them help you design the solution rather than thinking you've got to provide the solution to every question. When people are on board, they'll be incredibly positive and supportive because they get what you're trying to do.
In terms of advice for others who are embarking on a journey of new ways of working, I think that the key is really for you as a leader to understand the challenges and the benefits from a really early stage.
I think communication is always key, not only within the technology teams themselves and keeping them up to speed with changes in priorities within the business, but the engagement with the business itself, understanding their drivers, their priorities.
I'd say it's never too early to start clearing the clutter and getting ready to be more mobile and more nimble.
I would definitely recommend to embrace the change.
People's expectations and wants in terms of flexible working, I think, is only going to increase. How are we going to accommodate that for the next generation in 5 and 10 years' time? How will that shape our real estate strategy, our office design strategy? I think we will see less of the regimented office desk layout. I think we'll see an increasing use of flexible working areas. I actually think we will see the creation of more meeting rooms. I don't call them offices because they should be flexible for everybody to use. But I think the days of people coming in and sitting in battery type hen environments are going. That's not how people want to work. That's not how they work best. That's not what energises them. I think giving the flexibility to work in different ways, which technology now enables, will just continue to increase.